Thank you for tuning in to Clapback. Clapback is brought to you by Kingdom Keys and Healthy Living. If you would like to correspond with us, please do so at clapback770 at gmail.com. That's clapback770 at gmail.com. If you would like to support us, please hit the Patreon button here on Podbean, or you can cash app us directly at $ Pastor K50. That's $ Pastor K50. Please share this presentation. Please like it. Phone lines are open. Our chat is open. Let's get into it. We've got a lot to talk about today. All right. So I'm going to play you something that I want you to hear, and I want you to listen to this. Here we go. One moment.
My daughter. And I'm being forcefully take a look at me. I'm a fucking specimen right here, buddy. Sir, I haven't gotten on my last. My hands are up on camera. All right. I'm in those. You're gonna get your ass whooped in front of fucking Lord and all creation. I'm gonna give you one more chance. You can bring that with you. All they see is on the whole thing. I'm being threatened. No, I'm not giving you a chance. I'm giving you a chance. I feel unsafe. And I'm in no threat to these three officers. My hands are up. I am doing nothing. Making sure this is all recorded. I've just been threatened by a lawful officer. I have just been threatened by a law officer. And two other officers stand by and say absolutely nothing. Willing to participate. My passenger door was open. My driver door was open. I have it on camera. I just rolled my window down to do so. I'm giving you to the camera free, sir. I'm still using all my camera. I am not resisting. I'm making sure it is being known. I am not resisting. Okay. My hands are up. One hand on this camera. My seatbelt is being arrested. That's fine. I'm not resisting. I was unlawfully. Sir, please do not touch me, sir. Keep your phone out. Sir, please do not touch me. See, that's where we're coming to a disagreement. I'm giving you to the count of three. Sir, do it. I'm not touching this officer. It's on camera. My hand is by my head. Right now. Now you're under arrest. I was being disobedient. I'm giving you to the count of three. This officer has threatened me, and I'm making it known I am no threat to this officer. I've been threatened. My life is in danger. My life is in danger. How you like that? How you like that? Put your hands up. Put your hands.
Okay, so let me read this article to you. Let me read this article to you. I am deeply disturbed, and I want to talk about this. So let me again. I want to read this to you. The Virginia State Trooper claimed to have smelled marijuana, but they found none in the car after pulling the man out. Knowing he was being live streamed, a Virginia State Trooper turned to the camera and smiled before placing a man in a chokehold and pulling him out of his car over a suspected smell of marijuana. Watch the show, folks, the trooper Charles Hewitt said to the camera before attacking Derek Thompson. Turns out Derek Thompson did not have any weed in the car. He just didn't want his rights violated. Thompson had been pulled over for an expired inspection tag when the cop claimed he smelled weed and ordered him out of the car. But Thompson refused to step out, claiming it to be an illegal search. He also believed he was being racially profiled. The cop called for backup and Hewitt arrived. You are going to get your ass whooped in front of the effing Lord and all creation, Hewitt yelled at Thompson before pulling him out. Hewitt later told Thompson there was no way he could be racist because he was married to a black woman. Thompson's attorney, however, said that appears to be a lie. The incident took place April 20th, 2019, but is just coming to light now after Thompson's attorney sent a letter to the Virginia Attorney General, Mark Herring, outlining the details that took place that day. The letter also includes racist posts from Hewitt's Facebook page. And so, police in this country has long used the smell of marijuana excuses as a way to search people's car, but the tactic should be legally obsolete with the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp at all federal levels. Hemp looks and smells just like marijuana, so the smell of weed just as easily be the smell of hemp, which why prosecutors are now dismissing such cases. It does not appear a lawsuit has been filed in the case at this time. Thompson was convicted for obstruction of government, but now that the video has surfaced, Hewitt has now been placed on paid administrative leave, according to the Washington Post. Now, there are many things that is wrong with this scenario that we have to address. And you may hear a bunch of noise in the background because my dog is always trying to be rude when I'm on my podcast. Now, I came across this particular story as I was scrolling through Facebook, and there is a gentleman who has a podcast on this platform, and his name is Ben Shapiro. He is a conservative, and if you pull up his Facebook and you go through the posts that Mr. Shapiro is always posting, if you listen to his podcast, and then if you look and read the post that people who follow him, what they say about racism, social injustice, slavery, reparations, there just seems to be an ignorance when it comes to, I don't understand how people can compare what the African American has been through in this country. And yes, there are a few African Americans that are on his posting that are in support of Mr. Shapiro's postings, and they tend to talk against their own people, which is a phenomenon within itself because you never, if you look at the white population, you will see that there are disagreements between conservatives and liberals. But one of the things that you don't see generally in the Caucasian demographic is you hardly ever see Caucasians making comments that demoralize their race, speak against their race. Even when they speak in terms of slavery being a horrible thing, you don't see them saying nasty things about white people and slavery. They'll talk about slavery, but they don't talk about we white people, or they don't say things against white people to put a face on slavery. You see, it's one thing, it's easy to talk about slavery as an institution, but it's another thing to talk about slavery and Jim Crow and racism and put a name or a face or demographic on it, because now you're becoming personal. And when you become personal, then you are forced to accept responsibility. and what does that responsibility look like? So you will have quite a few people that will say things such as slavery's been over for 100 years, and none of us living today are either slaves or had anything to do with slavery. But one of the insensitive things that white people in general don't understand, and some of these black people that want to assimilate into the white culture, what they don't understand is that, yes, you may not have had slaves in your heritage. Maybe your grandparents and great grandparents and great great grandparents were not slave owners. And maybe your grandparents, when they grew up in the 30s and 40s, and maybe your parents, when they grew up in the 50s, and you were born in the 60s or whenever you were born, maybe you were not racist from the standpoint where you did racist act. Maybe you never called a black person a racial slur. But the fact is that the majority of white people have benefited from the social injustice, the systemic racism, and the systems that have been set up for them against black people. And there's a thing in America that's called an accomplice to a crime. What that looks like and what that simply means is that if I see you committing an injustice, or if I come to you and I say, I'm coming to pick you up for dinner, and I pick you up for dinner, and on the way to the restaurant, I stop at the bank and I rob that bank, then you being in the car, if you do nothing to report me or to stop me, and then you go sit down and eat dinner with me, and that meal is paid with the money that was just robbed at the bank, even though you didn't steal from the bank, you are an accomplice because you did nothing to report the crime, and you benefited by having a meal that was paid for with the proceeds of a crime. And so there are many white people in this world, again, that have never owned a slave, never whooped a black person, never raped a black person, may have never used a racial slur. But if you have benefited from systemic racism and the systems that were put in place on your job, when you've seen black people, women be passed over jobs, when you've seen in your community when minorities are not allowed to move in communities, when you're part of a banking system and you see where blacks are denied the same loan request as whites with the same credit score, and you do nothing. When you see police brutality and you don't cry out against it, and you don't demand change, you are as much as the problem as the one who is committing it, because your silence gives an arena. Your silence gives an arena and gives fuel for those actions to take place. Because when you don't speak against something, when you don't stand up for injustice, then you yourself have become unjust. You have become part of the problem. So when I looked at Ben Shapiro's postings on Facebook, got into a conversation about slavery with some of his posters, got into a conversation about social injustice and things of this nature. And when you go down his string of conversations that people are posting on his Facebook, you see and hear, and or not hear, you see the comments that are made about one of the comments, a lady by the name of Julie Clancy. She put Black privilege, being able to break any law or achieve unlimited success and still be viewed as a victim. So these are people who do not have the same experience. They're only looking at things through the prism of their experience, which is white privilege. And because they're looking and viewing at everything through the prism of white privilege, there is no connection, there is no understanding of what another demographic goes through. There is no understanding of what systemic racism and what slavery and what Jim Crow has done by decimating the Black community. There is no understanding as to why in the Black community there is violence, there is drugs, there is poverty, there is lack of education. And on top of that, those who are able to go through the sieve and make it out of a ghetto somehow think that it was only their hard work. Somehow they think that everyone else can do what they did and achieve the same results, not taking into account that there's always an exception to the rule. But if we have exceptions to the rule, then that says something is wrong with the system, because an exception means that this is something that normally doesn't happen or transpire. So if we have a system and a situation where we only have exceptions and we don't have an actual reality, if we don't have that actual reality that happens to everyone, then there is an injustice that is done. And because that injustice is being done, if a person cannot have empathy for someone else, let me say it like this. As a Christian heterosexual, from a Christian foundation, I don't support and believe in the gay lifestyle. Now, I don't discriminate, because at my very base of being a human being, I believe that, as the text is written, all men are created equal, which means that who you sleep with doesn't determine your rights in society. But having said that, it is hard for me to understand and comprehend the love that a man can have for another man. It is hard for me to comprehend the love that a woman can have for another woman. But even though I'm unable to comprehend and understand how another man can be turned on by another man, I still have enough humanity to understand that as a person, they have a right to exist and to live and have the same privileges. What has happened in the white community is that the white community, because they can't identify with the Black experience, they don't even try to have empathy for the humanity of Blacks. So let's talk about this particular post that I just played for you, and there's just so much in this post that is just so wrong, so wrong. And if you have a chance, you can see the video on news. It's NEWS, M as in Mary, A, V as in Victor, EN.IO/. You can see it. or you can just type in probably on YouTube, watch unhinged cop turns to camera and smiles before choking and beating a man. So they pulled this man over in Virginia. They pulled the man over because I guess he had expired plates. After pulling him over, they use what they always do with black people. Oh, I smell marijuana. Because see, they need a reason to be able to violate your rights. And see, they feel as though as long as they get it on camera by saying they smell weed, then this allows them to violate your rights. So this gentleman is sitting in his car. He's sitting in his seatbelt. One hand, he is videoing with his cell phone. The other hand, he has raised above his hand. He is not resisting. He is not fighting. He's never raised his voice. He's never called the police officer out of his name, of their name, because there are 3 police officers that are there. And he never raises his voice. He keeps respectfully calling him sir. Because many white people say that black people are disrespectful to police officers. If they were respectful, then they wouldn't get shot or they wouldn't get beat. Now, I have issue with that because I'm a man just like you're a man, and you can't talk to me any kind of way just because you have a badge. But even when we do what you say we need to do to stay safe, we're still not safe. So he doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't call the police officer out of his name. He's talking calmly. The police officer sees that he's recording and he's smiling. And he looks into the camera. And again, I want to read this. I want to read this again to you. Knowing he was being live streamed, a Virginia state trooper turned to the camera and smiled before placing a man in a chokehold, pulling him out of his car over the suspected smell of marijuana. He said, it says, watch the show, folks. This is what the police officer says when he looks into the camera. He says, watch the show, folks. He says to Hewitt before the camera, before he starts tagging, he says, he tells him, you're going to get your ass whooped in front of effing Lord and all creation. This is the police officer telling a calm man who is sitting in his automobile, who the police illegally went into his car because there was no legitimate cause for them to enter the car, illegal search and seizure. In the video, you see as soon as the police comes to the scene, he illegally opens up this man's door. He gets in front of his face. He's yelling at this man. He tells him that he's going to whoop his ass. He says some other things. He said he's going to whoop him in front of God and all creation. He tells everyone on Facebook that while this guy is recording on Facebook, he says, watch the show, everybody. He yells at him and says, I'm going to give you to the count of 3. And he's screaming at him. He's pointing in his face. He's so close that they could have kissed. And he counts, and then he chokes the man, drags him out of the car, and tells him, you like that now? You see that now? This is what you get. You can hear the man still say, man, sir, as he's getting beat, he's saying, sir, you are hurting me. Please get your knee off of my neck. Sir, you are hurting me. You are attacking me. Please, sir, you're hurting me. And the police says they don't care. They arrest the man. They arrest this man for obstruction of justice. Now, remember, they said they smelled marijuana. They did a thorough search of his person and his automobile, found no marijuana. Found no, now this happened back in April of 2019. Now remember, let me read it again. Police in this country has long used the smell of marijuana excuse as a way to search people's car, but that tactic should be legally obsolete with the passing of the 2018 Farm Bill, which legalized hemp at the federal level. Hemp looks and smells just like marijuana, so the smell of weed could just as easily be the smell of hemp, which is why prosecutors are now dismissing such cases. It does not appear a lawsuit has been filed. This gentleman has still not filed a lawsuit. Thompson was convicted for obstruction of government, but now the video has surfaced. Hughes has been placed on administrative paid leave. Now, we've got some problems here. This man was convicted, the black man was convicted for obstruction of government. When the video comes out and we see the egregious activities of this police officer, he is punished by getting a paid vacation. He is put on paid administrative leave. I want you to let that sink in. I want you to let that sink in. So you tell us, don't be smart with the police. Don't mouth off. Do what they tell you. Now, there are 3 officers there, and this was not the original officer on the scene. He was called by the other officer because, again, when you do stops on the highway or when they do stops, the police, rightfully so, call for backup. He called for this, the other police officer called for backup, and this guy and another guy shows up. Immediately when this guy shows up, he's already on 100. I don't think you believe me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play it again because I want you to hear this. I want you to hear it.
Can't do that. This officer is trying to unlock my car. This officer is unlocking my car. They just illegally entered my car. And I'm being forcefully removed. Take a look at me. I'm a fucking specimen right here, buddy. Sir, I haven't gotten on my last. My hands are up on camera. All right. I'm in those. You're going to get your ass whooped in front of the Lord and all creation. I'm going to give you one more chance. You can bring that with you. Oh, it's the whole thing. I'm being threatened. No, I'll give you a chance. I'm giving you a chance. I feel unsafe. And I'm my hands are up. I am doing nothing for anything. Making sure this is all recorded. I've just been threatened by a lawful officer. I have just been threatened by a law officer. There's 2 other officers stand by and say absolutely nothing. Willing to participate. My passenger door was open. My driver door was open. I have it on camera. He rolled my window down to do so. I'm getting you to the count of 3, sir. I'm still listening on camera. I am not resisting. I'm making sure it is being known. I am not resisting. Okay. My hands are up. One hand on this camera. My seatbelt is being arrested. I am not resisting. That was unlawful. Sir, please do not touch me, sir. Keep your phone out. Sir, please do not touch me. See, that's where we're coming to a disagreement. I'm giving you to the count of 3. Sir, no. I'm not saying this officer. It's on camera. My hand is by my head. Right now, praying. Now you're being arrested. Now you're being arrested. I was being called. It's okay. I'm giving you to the count of 3. This officer has threatened me, and I'm making it known I am no threat to this officer. I've been threatened. My life is in danger. My life is in danger. Put your hands up. You are harming me, sir. You are
Okay, so again, you've got to see the video because before this officer pulls this man, chokes him, and pulls him out of his car, he looks into the camera, he smiles and tells everyone to watch the show. And when he gets him out of the car, the officer responds to him and says, "How do you like it now? How do you like it now?" Now, I don't know anyone that could look at that particular video and say that's not police brutality. I don't know anyone who could look at that video and justify the actions of this police officer and what he's done. And too often, when law enforcement steps out of line, they get paid administrative leave. Could you imagine you beating someone up at your job, and the penalty for that, they're going to send you home for a couple weeks. They're going to send you home for a couple of weeks, and then they're going to pay you. And we wonder why a state trooper can violate the rights of a human being. I mean, there's no fear from the police. And here we go again. You have two other officers that stood by, supported the report that this officer reported and detailed, said nothing about the abuse. And you're mad because Black people are saying Black Lives Matter. You're upset because there's a group of people that are marching and saying Black Lives Matter. A group of people who are saying we're still being oppressed, taken advantage of. And you don't understand why. You don't understand why we don't respect the Star-Spangled Banner when you know the words and you read the fourth verse of the song that makes reference to slaves and killing slaves. When we don't salute a constitution that was not written with us in mind. When we don't celebrate the 4th of July as you celebrate the 4th of July. When we say this country has never been great, and the country has never been great. It's been great for white people. So when we get offended when we see you wear your Make America Great Again hat, because to us, that signifies you're wanting to bring back the Civil War era. You want to bring back the era of slavery and Jim Crow. You want to bring back the era when we were considered chattel and property. You want to bring back the era where you could whoop a Black man, you could rape his woman, because that's the only thing that you can be referring to, because America has never been great. And then in this particular strand of posts on Shapiro's, Ben Shapiro's commentary, someone had written, slavery couldn't have happened if Black people hadn't helped capture slaves. And there's some truth to that, but again, you've got to go back to the beginning. Just as this government has paid Black people to sell drugs in their neighborhood, because again, Chicago, Philadelphia, Detroit, every major metropolitan area that has ghettos, I've never driven in one of them where I saw poppy fields or cocaine fields. We don't own planes. We don't run the government. We don't run the ports. So how do the drugs get into our cities? You see, it was the white man who came up with the concept of slavery and paid opportunists, because we have opportunists in every demographic. But they paid opportunists that were more concerned about wealth and gaining and were willing to sell out their people. So don't put that on Black people. Because had you not went there to Africa and other places in the Dominican Republic and over in Haiti, if you hadn't went to all these places and paid and sought out weak-minded Black people that wanted to take advantage of their own people and offered them payment and offered them positions and titles, you never would have been able to achieve slavery in the manner in which you did. So when you talk about you don't believe in reparations, what kind of heart do you have? When you come back and you talk about slavery is bad, but then when we put a face to slavery and say you're part of it, when we say systemic racism is a problem, you're okay with that. But when we put a face on it and we bring it home to you and say that, yes, maybe you haven't had slaves, but you lived the white privilege and you've gained because of slavery, you have an issue with that. And to my poor Black people, in my conclusion, to my poor Black brothers and sisters who think that you are part of the club, you're not. There's a difference between integration and assimilation. You're an honorary member. You're assimilated into the society, which means they can take you out at any time. Do you not realize if they got together and decided to put us back into slavery, we don't have enough guns, we don't have enough resources to stop them from doing it. Just as they did when we won our right to vote. The law was on our side, but they administered the law. So they said to us, tell me how many marbles are in that jar. You couldn't tell them, so you couldn't vote. Read this paragraph out of the encyclopedia. Well, you weren't educated, so you can't read. Tell me how many millimeters are in a mile. You have no clue, so you can't vote. But the law didn't say that. The law said that you had a right to vote, but they took that from you. You have a problem with reparations for the social injustice, for the systemic racism, for the slavery, for the post-traumatic stress, for the abuse, for the poverty, for the lack of opportunity, for the lack of jobs, for the lack of everything. You have a problem with reparations. Shame on you. Shame on you. Shame on you for doing nothing. Shame on you for standing by and allowing your people to use the system to keep us down. Well, there it is for Friday. I want you to have a great weekend. Have a great weekend. Be safe out there. Make sure you're social distance. Make sure you're wearing your mask. Thank you for listening to Clapback. Clapback is brought to you by Kingdom Keys and Healthy Living. If you would like to correspond with Clapback, do so at clapback770@gmail.com. That's clapback770@gmail.com. If you would like to support what we're doing, please hit the Patreon button, or you can Cash App us at $PastorK50. That's $PastorK50. Help us to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and support our communities. We're supporting the St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We are supporting the Shriners Children's Hospital. Until the next time, remember, it's time to clap back.